Hi, everyone. That was very peaceful. I feel like we were like sojourning down a river or something. I'm Leela Rondeau. I am Administrative Coordinator of Instruction for Division of Special Education. I'm so excited to welcome you to our professional development this afternoon. This is Preventative Strategies to Support Inclusive Practices in the Least Restrictive Environment. We get asked all the time about what to do. What about behavior, right? What about our students with disabilities? Maybe the behavior is such that there's an idea that our students can't participate with their general education peers. And so much of that work that I think they're going to talk about today can be done in the preventative space so that we don't get to those tier 2 and tier 3 behaviors, right? Things that we can set up our students and ourselves for success. So I'm going to turn it over to Shane and Bernice, and we're just really delighted that everyone's here today. So off to you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. We're excited to be here. We want to take a quick moment to get our PowerPoint to work. There we go. So before we begin, we want to quickly introduce ourselves so you know who we are.
So my name is Bernice, and I was a classroom teacher for 15 years. I did a lot of, I taught a long time in moderate severe autism program, and I really loved that. And my favorite part of that was doing behavior support. So I followed that path to behavior support, and now I'm, sharing all of the things that I was able to learn in that time with you guys. Shane?
I'm Shane. I'm part of our behavior unit. I support our Region North with Bernice. My path to special education is a little bit different than some folks. I actually started as a gen ed teacher. I spent 13 years in gen ed, and I'm rounding out year 7 in special education. So this is my 20th year going in, and I will have to say inclusion has got to be some of the work that I feel most passionate about. I think is most impactful, not only for our individual students, but also for our communities. Before we dive too far in, we want to share that we are part of a really small team of behavior specialists, and we are just so excited for this opportunity to partner with our colleagues who support instruction. And we're really excited to contribute to our strategic plan to reduce our opportunity gaps as part of Pillar 1.
So our district's strategic plan has made it a priority to eliminate opportunity gaps for our students by ensuring that 80% of our students with IEPs are in the gen ed program for at least 80% of the school day. It's an ambitious goal, and it's the right thing to do. And we know that you will all make this successful for all of our students.
We want to share that before we got started, we posted a quick link to our resources. We have a handout for today, so our colleagues are going to post that link. And it asks for your name and your school just so we can communicate with you, but it'll also ask you if you would like a copy of a book that we're going to talk about a little later in the presentation. And once you submit that, you'll see our handout. It has all the links for today's presentation. And so I see it in the chat. So you're welcome to go ahead and take a look at that. And while you're doing that, we just want to do a quick check-in with y'all. Which puppy might reflect how you're feeling today? Extra credit for those of you that picked my dog. Just saying. But you can scan the QR code, or if you're on another device, you can go to menti.com and use the code that's on the screen. So we'll go ahead and let folks respond. I see there's a response. That would have been my go-to dog, but it's not my dog, so that's not extra credit. I know that some of you may be on shared devices. So if you are in a library or in a classroom with other folks, go ahead and scan that QR code and let's see where everyone's at. I think we have about 100 participants today. So we'll give everyone a good 30 seconds more to respond. Seems like everyone's around across the board today, huh?
Mhm. Good puppy 3.
Bernice is voting for puppy 3. I'm biased. I need to say puppy 5. Puppies 5. And if you're on the Mentimeter, you can leave that screen open. We have a couple activities through Mentimeter today. So that way you don't have to keep scanning the link. Okay, it's kind of like popcorn. I think the responses are slowing. So we'll give it a good 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So thanks for sharing. Looks like we're all across, all over the place. Puppy 3 seems to be our winner.
Our tired puppy. It's been a long day.
Tired puppy. I think Bernice and I are really puppies 5, and puppies 5 are my moose and bear. So that's kind of how we feel today. Really excited to be here. Maybe a little bit too excited. So
Yes.
don't run away. Okay. Thank you for your participation. We really appreciate it. And puppy 3 keeps getting more responses. Okay. Our objectives today, we've got 3 of them. Our first one, and I know Leela has framed this into a context of, what are some preventative strategies that we might use to prevent behaviors that are unexpected, behaviors that we would prefer not to see. We were very unsure of our audience today because we know that a number of you come from different roles. You could be administrators, teachers, special education teachers, paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, or I don't know, a number of different roles that support our school community. But we wanted to emphasize that each one of you has an important role to play in making sure an environment is inclusive of all learners. So our first objective is really to have participants understand our role, as a shared role as leaders in creating inclusive learning environments where everyone can achieve their individual success.
Yes, and we want to help make sure that your teams can locate and utilize existing resources that empower us as leaders to support inclusion.
And it says this last on here, but I think this is an ongoing one that's super important. We want to reflect on our current practices, our current inclusive practices, and be able to plan next steps. Because knowing this journey, these are incremental changes, and every reiteration of our different environments really is towards more inclusion. So we're not gonna stop once we hit our goal. There's always going to be a way to expand and become more inclusive. So I think it's super important that we are all on the same page as we think about inclusion, because I think everyone's at a different place. And we want to refresh everyone's memory with a short video. This is one of my favorites. I say that a lot. I have a lot of favorites, right? Shelley Moore is presenting information on the evolution of inclusion. Many of you may have seen this before. But I think I've always found it to be a good refresher to re-energize and remember my why. My why is, for me, we are public education champions. We teach in public education, and public education means for all. And that does not exclude certain groups. So it's super important that we hear the message that Shelley's presented. And we just have a short clip here. It's actually only a 5-minute video. So if you'd like to see the whole video, the link is included on your Shelley.
Evolution of inclusion. Okay, so you remember the dots? I know. I've shown you these before. But one colleague of mine suggested to me once, he goes, what if we didn't look at these as different concepts that we compare to each other, but instead as an evolution of time? It was totally brilliant. Now, we could look at this timeline through the lens of any marginalized population, but to understand this timeline from the inclusion and disability perspective, we have to go back in time a little bit. Many of us know or are connected to someone who experienced institutionalization. It was even recommended to families by doctors. The institutionalization movement is an example of exclusion. It separated individuals with disabilities from their families without choice. But the disability rights movement over the past 50 years, with the hard work of some incredible self-advocates and families, and maybe a little help from Geraldo Rivera, pushed communities to shift so that individuals of all abilities were welcomed and living in the same settings as their family and friends. This shift from institutions to communities, this was the start of the inclusive evolution. We have movement, but can we do better? Although many individuals are no longer excluded from their families and communities, they were, and let's be honest, they still are, expected to attend segregated schools or self-contained special education programs that are totally separate from the rest of the school community. And so parents started to ask some very good questions. You see, children with disabilities have siblings without disabilities, and families wanted all their kids to have equitable access to community-based education together. Kids started to be integrated into classrooms with their peers. They're in math together. They're in gym class together. They're eating lunch together. Kids are together. This is better. The shift from segregated to integrated schools and classrooms, this is the next step in the evolution of inclusion. We have movement, but can we do better? Well, this is where things get tricky, because integration, it doesn't take long to realize that just being together, it's not enough. Although in the same classroom, students with disabilities are often just that. They're physically in the classroom. They may sometimes have parallel activities, but mostly it's loosely connected classroom tasks. Now, you don't need me to tell you that just physically sharing space and time is enough to make you feel like you belong in a community. I mean, come on, there are Disney movies made about this. Breathing the same air is not enough. Do you remember the Titans? I do. The evolution from integration to inclusion is now the topic of many conversations in communities and schools around the world. How do we support individuals to be meaningfully included and not just physically integrated? It's not just about where kids go in their day, but why. What is the purpose to the places that they go? It's now school-based teams and staff that are asking questions about how to do this. How can we support purposeful and meaningful placements for kids with disabilities? In inclusive classrooms and schools, students aren't just present, but they have roles and responsibilities in their classrooms and also meaningfully connecting to their peers. This is inclusion. So there you have it, my friends. A brief history of inclusion in about 5 minutes.
That was our short intro. There's a couple more minutes to it, and we invite you to go ahead and take a look at that. And we're monitoring the Q&A, and we will answer some things live as we can. But it's hard for us with a couple screens going on here. So if you do have questions, the Q&A is available. We'll take a look at it during natural breaks, or our colleagues will be answering them live for us. So, for me, one of the striking aspects of Shelley Moore's presentation is thinking about our history of any marginalized population and how this evolution of inclusion, from exclusion to segregation to integration and now to inclusion, is part of people's journeys in different points of their experiences. So I think, as a public educator, I shared this before, I really think that free and appropriate public education is one of the historic opportunities that we have to uplift communities, not just for one, but for all. And thinking of inclusion from our disabilities perspective, I think a lot of you can see we do special day classes in schools. And that is reflective of segregation. That is better than exclusion, right? And a lot of times we do some mainstreaming at different levels, but is that mainstreaming really bringing forward towards that inclusion lens? Each iteration here has become better than previous, but what can we do to move forward? And thinking that, is breathing the same air, is that enough?
It's true, making all of our students feel valued for the contributions to their classroom, I think is that big leap. Every student brings something to the classroom. And how can we include the value that they're bringing to the classroom in the classroom so that everybody appreciates it?
So, integration, is evident in our practice. If we really are believers that breathing the same air is not enough, we need to be able to answer the question of how do we get to the point that all students, staff, and members in our school community have the same meaningful roles, responsibilities, and peer connections in our environment. And we do that through leadership. Whether you're leading your classroom, your grade level, your office, your learning center, your library, or any other place to support students, you have a role in leading, creating, and fostering an inclusive environment supportive of all learners. And whether you're an administrator here, coordinator, counselor, teacher, in both general education and special education, a paraeducator, a nurse, itinerant staff, office staff, or any other role in your school site. I may have left some off, but I know there's a lot of you. Your leadership is what will make the difference when you move to inclusion to support your community.
Yes, and we do want to acknowledge there is a great deal on everyone's plates. So in thinking through our presentation today, we were deliberate in pulling together existing resources and organizing them in a way that's applicable to your role as leaders in implementing proactive behavior strategies so that you can lead your classroom or your grade level team or your school to achieve inclusion success.
As we navigate this presentation, we invite you to consider your specific role. Perhaps it's as an administrator, some of you double as a grade level chair, department chair, or any other role. And we'd like you to think about the strategies that are presented and generalize them for your specific role. Each and every one of you plays such an integral part to ensuring that our communities are inclusive. So we challenge you today to process what we share and think about how it may empower you to support your community. Before we move forward, let's make sure you got the tools. And, before we started the webinar, we had a QR code posted for a handout. And so it's back here that way, somewhere that way. Go ahead and scan it. And it's a direct link to a resource. I think our colleagues are posting it in the chat as well. So everything we discussed today is linked to this handout. So you have it as a one-place reference for you.
Okay, the first tool that we're going to talk about is the school-wide Tier 1 Look-Fors provided by the Student Health and Human Services Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Restorative Practices team. They're a little bit better known as the PBIS-RP team. There is a sheet for classroom look-fors and a separate sheet for school-wide look-fors. So pay attention to the top of the sheet so you know which one you're looking at and which one is applicable to you and your role in your school. So the features presented on the Tier 1 Look-Fors represent the foundation of behavior support that should exist in each school and classroom as they are there to support all of our learners. We're not going to have time today to connect to each component of the Tier 1 Look-Fors, but if you do find what we share today to be helpful, there's more information on during weekly drop-in sessions that the PBIS-RP team hosts. You can join those sessions and get information on different ways to support the strategies and the things on the Look-For guide.
We've included their flyer for their drop-in sessions on our handout. So be on the lookout for that. We also want to share a couple of Schoology resources. These are all existing because we know that a lot of resources have been shared with everyone in the past. And we just want to make sure that we're not adding to your plates. I had a conversation with an administrator just yesterday, and she has kept talking about all the things that are piling on this plate. I'm thinking of her at a buffet and that chicken drumstick is rolling off the plate. There's just no more room for things. So we want to make sure that we are reorganizing things that we've already or are already accessible to you. So we have two groups in Schoology. One is a special education behavior support department. Our SPED department's behavior support teams resources are very specific to, we have a visuals resource, direct links on the bottom, but our Schoology page is primarily focused on functional behavior assessment and the behavior intervention plan. What may be more useful for this team when we're thinking inclusion, we're thinking of supporting all students, and that may be from our PBSRP friends, and that's on the right side of the screen. You'll see their Schoology code there.
And their website is also there, which that website is so full of amazing resources. They've done a lot of work compiling resources that meet the needs of those tier 1 look-fors to make it as easy as possible for us to access.
For today, we have this guiding principle. Our guiding principle is psst, so you can remember it, right? And you say psst, and people are like, what's going on here, right? And I think this is a good acronym for even for us as classroom teachers, when we think about sharing ideas and sharing expected behaviors. If we think through the lens of psst, we might actually be on a roll on something. And so this acronym stands for ideas that are practical, sticky, and transformative lead towards our expected outcomes. And so, I really love the belief that sometimes the most effective solution are the simplest, are most practical. And our ideas should also be sticky. So if good ideas are so complex that I'm not going to remember what it is after this webinar, it's not helpful, right? And last, our ideas have to be transformative. It's going to change or alter something to such an extent that it'll make our lives better. It'll allow us to feel the impact of our students' success. And because if we don't experience that, then, what's the point? And I want to share that the underlying theme for today's presentation is from a leadership expert named Glenn Faruya. I actually started my teaching career in Hawaii, and most of my teaching career has been in Hawaii. And I was a coordinator leading inclusion. And I was telling Bernice, as we were building this, one of the things that my teacher shared with me as we were building these inclusive environments was that we hired lots of people to talk to us about strategies, but the teachers had such an extensive skill set just of their own experience. It wasn't the strategies that were an issue. It was how do we organize it and execute? And this is where leadership became the unifying factor for our teams. And every year we would ask them for PD, what would you like to see next year? And they always said, hey, we want to bring that Mr. Faria back, just thinking through the lens of leadership, re-energize them, because our work, even in the classroom, we lead students to their success. So it was transformative, not just for our administrators or coordinators to think about leadership, but also for our staff.
So as leaders, it's important to understand that our role is bringing together a diverse set of qualities, whether that be ideas, styles, characters, or other qualities that we bring into our schools, and specifically our classrooms. So think about this quote from Glenn Faruya. He has identified this as the essence of a leader. And it's the true worth of a person is not to be found in themselves, but in the colors and the textures that come alive in others. So in thinking about your own leadership, what colors and textures do you bring out in your students, your colleagues, parents, guardians, the caregivers that we interact with every day, and in the community around you?
We're going to ask you to share some of these, because in our inclusive environment, we really use that opportunity to bring out these different qualities and values So using the Mentimeter link, I gotta dip to the side here. It's coming, folks, hang on.
Give us just a second.
Give Shane a moment to play with this. Oh, I need to go more over. That's what it is. There it is. So here's the Mentimeter QR code, might be easier for some of you. I'll leave this up for 15, 20 seconds so you can, grab that phone and scan away. And let's see what ideas we can share that in regards to what colors and textures you bring out in your community. Oh, that came up pretty fast. I'm going to put Bernice on the spot. What are a couple of things that you think of?
I was just trying to think like, I think that I'm very optimistic, and I feel like everybody brings something to the table. Sometimes it's just figuring out how we can work together to make what we bring to the table, to shape that into something that's needed at the school side, at the classroom. I think that's a big one for me. How about you?
I think I've become, let me rephrase this. I worked in most of my career in Northeast. And one of the things the administrator always shared with me, even in the most tense of times, is that we must always assume positive intentions. And I've come to really appreciate that. And so I think for me is what I hope I bring out in folks is the ability to be transparent and honest without feeling judgment. So I think oftentimes people get bottled up, right? Because they're afraid of people's reactions to their statements, but we really can't be inclusive unless we have an environment where people can share. So I hope I am able to bring that. I see pastel, soft, harmonious. What else do you see?
I read, how do we scroll up? Because I read one that was, I don't know, great. I love the idea of supporting the whole child, right? Not just inclusion in the form of academics and not just inclusion in the form of social emotional, but really supporting the whole child. That's fantastic.
Flexibility, positivity, my kind of people.
Grace.
Y'all are gonna laugh at me. Bernice last name is. I'm actually very introverted. So a lot of these icebreakers, they really break me. And you folks are probably laughing because you're looking at me now, camera like this. I've learned how to turn it on and off, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna be exhausted. But I think that, in a space where both extroverts and introverts can really exist in a way that is productive, I think that's a great outcome, right?
Yes, and all these answers, you guys, that's a great, keeping an open mind and an open heart. That's what it's all about, right? And when we're able to do that, our students are able to see that and they're able to feel that, and then they're able to do it.
All these get saved in our Mentimeter cloud. And I hope that you folks are enjoying reading your comments too, because I actually want to be in all of your schools. Like, these are all elements I feel like would make a space that, I would feel comfortable in. So I'm going to change the screen. I'm so sorry, but this is exciting to read. Okay. So in addition to laying the foundation, right, of bringing out colors and textures in our inclusive schools and classrooms, good leaders use tools to gauge where our colleagues and students are at so that we can provide supports or adjust supports to maximize connection.
Okay, so when we're talking about that in terms of our classrooms and checking in with our students, this is what we think is how we feel. What we feel determines the choices that we make. So we need to think about, right, what our students are bringing to the table. They're not just these empty buckets just waiting to be filled, right? They're bringing things with them. So if you've got, a high school student who they got to go after school because they've got to get their younger sibling by a certain time. or, they've got to figure out they have to cook dinner that night, or they're bringing all these things into the classroom with them, and that's going to influence how they feel. So us, having some empathy toward that and understanding how they feel and asking them to express their feelings to us is going to help them determine good choices to make, right? Because that's at the end of the day, what we need them to do is to make good choices, even though they're carrying all of those things with them.
So thinking through practical, sticky, transformative, here are some ways that we can assess readiness to engage. These come from the PBS RP group in the resource folder under check-ins. So here's a simple one, great for younger kids, some adult ones too. Here's one that may be more age appropriate for older kiddos, adults, or if you got, want to make it content friendly, here's one that maybe a science teacher might be able to use. It's actually intriguing if you get to look at this one. It's pretty cool. Here are examples of things that Bernice and I have used. I taught high school, so I'm ashamed to say that a lot of this came later in my teaching career. I mean, when I first started teaching, I was in the start of our standards movement, so this kind of stuff wasn't high on the priority list. But later, in checking in, I like the 5-point scale, the one that's on the right. And the reason why I like this is for high school students, oftentimes it's not something they want to share outright. They're not willing to jump up and down and say, I feel like a 4 or 5. This allowed me from the front of the classroom to say, hey, let's check in. And we taught students like how to say 1, and you can put a 1 across my chest. And that way, if I see a 1, I know that that student's doing fine. Or a student might put a 5 across your chest. Now, a 5 is, it's no judgment. This is how the student feels at this moment. That was a signal to me. Hey, Mr. O, not time to put any massive demands on the kiddo. I had a space in my classroom that they could sit in and wait till I was ready to address them. I would start my class and then I would go and check in and be like, hey, what's up? What can we do to assess the situation? Is this something that I can help you with, or do we need to go and get some help elsewhere? Is there one that you like, Bernice?
I actually use something very similar to the one on the left over here. And I used to keep a small version of this on my student desks, right? It was laminated. They could see the zones, and at a specific time of the morning, everybody would go through and they could just circle what zone they were in. They could put a check mark, whatever, some way, so that when I'm walking along through tables, or when I have a minute to go check what they marked, I can see who's in red, who's in yellow, who's in green, and sort of adjust my day to match theirs, so that I'm not putting unnecessary demands on somebody who might be in the yellow or the red zone, and that we can focus on using the tools that we've taught them to move them through those zones, so that they can still have a productive day.
And really, the most important component when we think about readiness to engage is if someone tells you they're in the red zone, or if they're in a 5, we have some expectations on how the student may address them. And then that also means there's expectation of adult staff. This would be in the classroom, our co-teachers, our paraprofessional, we all need to be on the same page. So if someone's telling me I'm at a 5, we all know that that means that the student can do A, B, and C, and the staff are doing A, B, and C. I don't need to go around and say, well, you feel like a 5, but here's your test. Kind of is inviting some trouble, right? So we want to make sure that if we're teaching students how to share their readiness, that we become respectful of that decision, and that we have procedures in place so that we can address them.
And that everyone in the school or the classroom is aware of and familiar with the system, right? So if somebody walks in and they don't know, you can just really quickly explain, oh, the student is in the yellow zone, so they're engaging in a little bit different activities to try and get a little regulated so that they can come back with the rest of the group.
And there's a question here, a comment. I teach student tools to release emotions that are challenging. And I think that's important because sometimes bottling up causes more harm than good. I'm thinking for my child. Okay, we don't need to talk about childhood. But anyhow, It's really important that we teach students appropriate ways to address their feelings, because otherwise they're going to go to what they know or don't know. And that could be those unexpected behaviors. Thanks for sharing. So it's important to remember all zones are okay, all feelings are okay, and we make others feel comfortable and safe when we're in the expected zone at the expected time. I think we just had an amazing conversation with our colleagues in instruction, and they talked about having these contracts, right? That talk about how it's okay to feel certain ways during certain topics. And I think that's great. It really shows students that sometimes we can feel uncomfortable, but there's got to be ways that are appropriate in the setting to address them.
And even letting students know ahead of time, right? Was going back to that conversation, letting students know ahead of time, you might feel this way as we're going through this, and that's okay. Here are some things you can do to deal with that, so that students know.
So we got kind of the big why first, right? We want to talk about, we're bringing out colors and textures in our communities. And then when we're talking here about, we're checking in, making sure people are ready to engage. I think our next section, this is going to be the bulk of what we have to share today, really boils down to trust. Now, how do we want to make sure our community trusts us as educators, as educator professionals? We trust each other. And to do that, Glenn Faria has 3 RIDDIs. We say 3 RIDDIs, so it sticks, right? We're thinking sticky. And our 3 RIDDIs are clarity, charity, and integrity. We're going to dive into each one of these. First, on clarity. Let's watch this 4-second clip.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll.
What do you all think?
So I was saying, Shane, the first time that I saw this video, I thought, I don't know a lot about baseball. Is that what you're supposed to do? That young man seems, it's pretty dramatic to fall down like that if the kid was supposed to throw that ball. But because I don't know the expectations around baseball, so I'm not sure what I just saw.
And I think it's pretty clear that our first baseman, I don't think he understood the expectations. Our colleague also shared, maybe they learned kickball first. And I think you can throw the ball at the other player with the kickball, not so much a baseball. But, I think the first baseman's probably standing there like, what did I do wrong? Like, what happened? So making sure that we have clear expectations is an essential part for building trust. We got to know what it is to be successful in different areas. So a lot of people have something like this, right? We have be respectful, responsible, and be safe. This is a school-wide one. And what we really like about this school-wide one is we're talking about the expectations of respectful, responsible, safe, but also providing positive examples of what it looks like in the bathroom, in the hallway. Is there something that stood out to you?
The thing that stands out to me is that this is another area where we really need to focus on teaching students exactly what the expectations are, right? When I say, to be respectful in the bathroom, you're using an inside voice. Well, my inside voice is going to look really, really different from Shane's inside voice. So exactly what that looks like, right? Even going as far as to maybe take your students to the restroom and model what an inside voice looks like, model what it looks like to give privacy to people, because we can't assume that anybody knows what any of this looks like.
Better yet, put the expectations where it's needed. So here's a sign at a school. It's placed in the hallway, and in the stairway and hallway, these are their expectations. In the classroom, you'll want to do this too. You might have the school-wide expectations. This one's kind to self, others, and environment. And in small group activities, this is what it looks like.
And I think, again, focusing on, teaching students ahead of time, if you're asking them to actively listen, what does that look like, right? My eyes are on the speaker, or my body is oriented toward a presentation, exactly what it looks like.
I'm going to put high school teacher hat on. I think this works for middle school too. Notice how this is telling kids what we want to see, what is expected. Sometimes we come across an expectations folder that says, don't do this. Now, I'm going to share. I'm of the belief that if you tell a kid not to do something and they want to get on your nerves, you've just given them license to do that, right?
You just told him how.
Yeah, so let's focus on what we want to see kids do, right? What are those behaviors that meet our expectations rather than those that don't? To help you think about activities in your class, in the classroom setting, and also for our administrators or coordinators leading PD, it helps if people know what the expectations are so they can be successful. One model is to use CHAMPS. There's an example for high school. It's called Achieve. That's in your handouts for today. But we'll just focus on CHAMPS because I like CHAMPS. It sticks better in my head. So thinking about conversation, can students or adults talk to each other during this activity? And at what level? How do they get help? What is the activity? What exactly are we doing? Can students move around? Is it okay for them to get up to grab materials? And then lastly, what does it look like to actively participate? If you can map out what the expectations are in each of these areas, you'll have a successful activity.
So this is something you cannot do enough, especially in the beginning of the year, because our students, they need to hear it over and over again, exactly what those expectations are. The more you can show them, the better. So if you're able to model it for them or show them a finished product, show them what they're working towards, you cannot do it enough.
And we'll go through the requests. We have, I think, 100 books or so, and we'll be happy to send it to you if you make the request on the link there. If there's multiple requests at schools and we run out of books, we'll contact you and see if we can send a few and so we can get more out. Now moving on to charity.
All right, so when we talk about charity in our classroom, we're essentially really talking about kindness, right? How can we bring more charity toward others, to kindness toward others to our classroom? And we want to focus on those 4 positives to 1 correction. And there's research coming out, right, that says 4 to 1 isn't enough. 6 to 1 is a better ratio. 8 to 1 even, but those 4 to 1 ratios, right, where you're giving kids connection and a sense of belonging, really are going to help you when you need to step in and give those corrections. They help students develop a strong sense of belonging, promote a growth mindset, build trust in the classroom and with you, and that will strengthen your relationships, create a more positive and caring classroom climate, establish a sense of safety and openness, and increase academic engagement and on-task behavior. This is one that I feel really strongly about. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering, right? Sometimes it's enough, when you tell a kid, hey, I'm so glad you're here today. You brought that great smile and that made my period. We're ready to go. We're gonna have a great day because of that smile. Some kids, they need that, and the more we can give it to them, the better.
And the adults too.
Yes.
I think it's super important that we as peers really acknowledge the great work that our fellow teachers do, especially in a co-teaching setting. If kids can see the adults sharing these positives over and over again, it sets that example and helps to build that classroom climate. Our last really has to do with integrity, and it really is the entire tier 1 look for. And Glenn Freya's quote is this: people trust leaders who walk their talk, live their beliefs, and keep their promises. With integrity, they trust your character and your word. So if you say to a student or a peer, hey, if you do this, you can get this. Irrespective of what else is going on, you need to follow through. Make sure you provide whatever it is you promise. Otherwise, your reinforcement is not going to be received as well. It's going to be a lot of mistrust there, right?
You lost some trust that you worked hard to get.
So we have a short video here. It's a short clip of a great speaker. I think a lot of you reflect on it, but it's a show that it's a TED Talk I would watch beginning in my school years. We'll watch a short clip.
But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is under relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad.
And that was Rita Pearson. TED Talk, this is Bernice is sharing it in chat just to our hosts and panelists, but our friends will share that with everyone. And the link is directly on the handout that we shared. This was my go-to for many years before I start each year. So much of my belief in public education is really exactly what she shared. You know, we're here to uplift people, not here to knock them down. So go ahead and look at that. And I think a lot of what she says has me built a lot of trust in her.
And the proactive, right? She's very proactive. She tells kids, you guys are the smartest kids That's why we're together, right? You guys are the best students, and here's what you need to believe about yourself. And she's giving them those positive affirmations to say to themselves. A good proactive strategy.
So if you ever need a good uplifting talk, she's a good one. It's a 7-minute video overall. Always fun to watch. We're going to round out with 3 big ideas. This first one is this duck. Bear with me. It's Mr. Perillo's idea. He says that your left foot are your operations. So everything we talked about to this point, your expectations, schedules, procedures, routines, how you operate, that's your left foot pedaling, okay? Now, if you're only pedaling your left foot, picture the duck, which way is it going? Okay, now that you have that in mind, wait, left pedal this way? Anyway, just one way, right? We have to balance that with thinking about, okay, my foot is pedaling. Am I seeing movement? How are my community reacting? How are my teachers reacting? If I'm the principal and I'm pedaling, I have my operations going, but there's issues with implementation. I can pedal faster and harder, but it's not going to impact things. Same like in our classrooms, right? If I implement some kind of strategy, it's working for a bunch of kids, but not everyone. Am I really going to make progress? And that's where that right foot's got to step in. And so we have big ideas on the right foot. You being here is your right foot pedaling away too, right? So how do we improve? How do we collaborate? How do we engage in professional development so that left foot's pedaling, but the right foot's right there to counterbalance and make sure that there are adjustments being made, that all student needs are being met? We'd like to suggest this inclusive approach. So think of the train station. There's a platform there. Train has a schedule, has some routines, there's an expectation. You climb those stairs to get to your train. But our friend comes in. You know, you could probably make it up the stairs.
Gonna take some time though.
It's going to take a little bit of time. So what do? We think with the right foot. How can we collaborate to engage, maybe design a ramp? So less incline, less steps to get in the way. How can we engage in professional development? Maybe this person could use some skill building so that they can go up an incline. Think multisensory. A lot of our instruction and a lot of our student needs based on disabilities really is an approach that there's a deficit, either in auditory, visual, attention. There's something missing. But if we can deliver things in multiple ways, we might be able to address them.
Yeah. Shaping the environment.
Yeah. And so we put this ramp in, right? Is our friend here in crutches the only one that benefits?
Right. It's going to make it so much easier for everyone. Everyone who comes through that train station, now you have more options, right? You can handle a heavier traffic flow. People who might be pushing a stroller and carrying 3 bags, now they've got the option of the ramp, which is excellent for everyone.
And we're going to put a plug in here for universal design for learning. You know, UDL is an approach to really level the playing field, taking a cognitive approach to think about how can we engage folks and create accessibility for everyone, a universally accessible design that will help engage every learner. And so we invite you to look forward to that PD. I know that's an important part of the inclusion discussion. And think about a lot of behavior challenges. A lot of it's communication driven. So if we can provide ways for people to access, we can minimize the frustration that is communicated oftentimes through behaviors we don't like to see. So we have some ideas on accessibility, make it visible.
Yeah. So this, what I think of when I see both of these is everybody can benefit from these, right? Everyone in the classroom can benefit. Some students are going to walk in, they're going to take a quick glance at it and they know what to do. Other students are going to have to go step by step, right? First, I put this away, then I'm going to come back and check it again to see what I do next. But it's going to make everyone's life easier because they're not relying on any person or somebody who may not be there to tell them what to do.
So we ask you to reflect. Is your duck swimming straight? Okay, we don't have that much time. I hope you reflect it. Now, we know that we are oftentimes confronted with challenging situations. And oftentimes this leads us, just as human beings, to have a flight or flee response, right? Flight or fight, one of those. Anyway, we want to encourage you all to be effective leaders. And remember this acronym. I want you to pace yourself, like you to pause, assess, choose, and engage.
Yeah, so many of the behaviors that you are going to deal with in the classroom are situational, right? They're based on the environment, the other peers in the classroom, maybe the request for work that you've given. So it's really beneficial to everyone if you can teach yourself, right, to pause, assess the situation, think about the events that preceded the behavior, and think about the variety of outcomes depending on how you react to the situation. So in just thinking about prevention, right, you assess, you're going to choose, right? Is this something that I really want to engage with the student on?
Because sometimes you might not. Sometimes there's a behavior that's really just annoying, but active engagement escalates that behavior. And we have kind of a visual. This is the escalation cycle. Sometimes we contribute to it and leads to acceleration or peak of behavior, which would really cause a disruption in a classroom. So we have a training called Preventing and Responding to Behavior that has a list of strategies at each phase of the escalation cycle, and they can provide more support. These are available through my PLN. If you type in preventing in the search, you'll see the 3 modules there. We encourage schools and school teams to take a look at that. Now, there's no I in team. Inclusion is a team approach. So we found 2 I's in inclusion. And there's 2 important I's here. The first one is individual effort. I think it's important once a school team has developed expectations for all members of an inclusive environment, what they need, what they're expected to do, that everyone put their individual effort to meet those expectations.
And the second one is going to be interdependence. So it's important to remember that we all have a variety of roles in our school, and how can our roles complement other people's roles, right? How can we work together to be the best classroom and best school for all of our students?
I was a gen ed teacher, right? That got to say, oh, well, this is a special education issue. And then look where that landed me. So I can tell you from experience, it is super important that no, it's not a special education issue. It's not a general education issue. It's a student issue. And who teaches students?
All
of us. And we are interdependent because we have our individual strengths. And a lot of our special education staff has a lot of strengths in understanding disability. But that understanding can also transfer to support a whole class environment. We want to round out with this last big idea. We want to think of a holistic approach. Sometimes when we're confronted with challenging behaviors, we look through a funnel, looking down the small end, and we focus in on one spot. Let's turn the funnel around and look at that issue in the context of a whole class, and thinking about colors and textures that the one spot brings to the situation. By zooming out, we get to see the colors and textures of community as a whole.
Yes.
And so today we thank you for your work to build inclusive learning environments. And we really thank you for your time this afternoon.
Yes, thank you for everything. You guys worked so hard to make it happen, and it is appreciated.
Now we are here, now that I can touch my computer again. If there are any questions, you're welcome to throw them in the Q&A. We're happy to stick around as long as folks would like, or as our instruction colleagues will allow us to hang out with you. Or